I am beyond honored to have Ashira here today. Ashira, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to also be here.
Oh, Ashira, right away, I want the listeners to know what we are diving into today. And one of the main themes is your spinal injury you had through an accident, which I'll ask you more about, and how you healed yourself. So I'm just so curious to hear all about that, but also just who you are as a soul prior to that accident, what you were doing then, and who is the Ashira after the accident, after you healed yourself and how your life changed. And also, I want the listeners to learn more about your Catharsis Holistic Healing Center, which is a trauma therapy project based in Palestine. And this is also how I was exposed to you and your work. This is how we met online. And I just can't wait to hear more about that because it's such a fantastic, phenomenal project that you have set up there. But let's start a bit before your accident, who you were before that.
Okay, so before, it's not really an accident.
Mm-hmm.
It's an injury.
Injury.
In the sense that it was like a targeted injury.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Palestinian, half Egyptian. My dad is Egyptian. I was born in Cyprus, actually.
Oh, I did not see this on your website. That's cool.
Yeah, and because my family was brought together through the war and the occupation, and I grew up in Jerusalem most of the time and in Ramallah. At age 16, I was arrested by Israeli soldiers. It was my first detention, and I was beaten and attacked by the soldiers when they took me, and it was at a peaceful musical protest.
Oh my goodness.
We were protesting in Jerusalem against the closure of the Orient House in 2000, and I think it's 2001.
Right.
Not very good with the numbers, but yeah. And before that, I was mainly into music. I was training to play the qanun, which is a Middle Eastern instrument. I wanted to be a musician, to sing mainly. It was the dream. And after that injury, it was just like a wake-up call that I'm not in the right the right place for music. Or at least in my young mind, it kind of reminded me that it's not very realistic as a dream. So I stopped playing music and I decided to become a journalist. And that's the trajectory that my life took from that one day. And since then, I went to university, studied journalism. It was the second Intifada, so it was a horrific time in Palestine when the Israeli army was raiding each and every village. It took us about 10 hours to get to university, our whole university.
Which university was that? Was it in Jerusalem or?
It was in Birzeit. It's called Birzeit University.
Okay.
And just to give you an idea, they dug all the holes around the university. So it was like an oasis. They blocked us in one area so that no one can reach with cars. So we would have to walk. Sometimes we'd have to take donkey rides in order to get to the university if we were lucky to have the university open. So I spent 2 years in that university, and then it became very difficult to study. And for me, I was also like very active. So it was also not working between Jerusalem and Birzeit to study. So I moved to Cyprus and I studied on the Turkish side in Cyprus, continued journalism. And after that, I immediately decided to come back and to keep working. And yeah, so I worked with a lot of media, and that was my main thing, doing social media, doing also some TV with Palestine TV. And I did a project called Sleepless in Gaza and Jerusalem, which was like a reality show.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It's still on YouTube as a reminder of my life back then.
I'm going to check that out. Is it, well, I guess it's not in English though, right? It's in Arabic.
In English.
Oh, it is in English. Nice.
It's in English, and the idea was just to show the daily lives of Palestinians. And I think it's still very interesting because it shows we were 7 girls. So we had girls in Gaza and in Jerusalem and the West Bank, and you get to see life in a way that's uncensored with the family and just the normal day life of people living under occupation.
Wow. Do you have a link that I can put up in the podcast show notes?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So the listeners can go check it out.
It's called Sleepless in Gaza and Jerusalem, just like Sleepless in Seattle, but
yes, I love the movie. So yes.
So I was working on that. I also worked with different media outlets, and then eventually with BBC Media Action. And I think it was that year I went to the UK. Then I got arrested again when I was working in a South African radio station. Arrested this time for my journalism work and for interviewing wanted Palestinians.
And that was in London, in the UK?
No, in Palestine by
Oh, in
Israeli.
Palestine, okay.
So I was detained and I was interrogated. This time I spent 3 nights in what they call military interrogation. And it was a horrific experience.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
after that, I decided I don't want to, I don't want to stay here anymore. And I needed to get out. My mental health was really bad. And then I got rearrested again the same year by the Israelis because of the work that we're doing at the station. And they shut down the station.
Oh, no.
And it was a station where like Palestinians and Israelis were working together in a radio station together to try and bridge the gap between the people led by South Africans who were working during the time of apartheid in South Africa. And of course, Israel was not too happy.
Wow.
So they arrested us and shut down the station.
That's crazy. What happened to the Israelis working there? They didn't get arrested.
They got arrested with us.
Oh,
we all got arrested. It was like South African, Palestinians.
That is crazy.
Israelis.
Oh my goodness. And then what happened? It got shut down? Yeah.
They shut it down completely. So I decided to go to the UK to do another postgraduate degree. And I also still did journalism. I was still intent on media. I don't know why after all that. And then returned to the country. I went into Internews and then into the BBC. And during that time, it was 2010, so it was the Arab Revolution. And I got again very active on the ground in the protests and what's going on in Palestine and the rest of the world, also in Egypt. For me, it was very important to follow what's going on. And we were protesting. We had peaceful protests. I won't say peaceful, I would say like nonviolent resistance was growing in Palestine as a main way to fight the Israeli occupation and to try to defend people's lands. And there's a village called Nabi Saleh, which is very close to Ramallah and Bir Zaid. And there, the Israeli army basically arrested most of the men, and it was only the women going out in the protests with the kids. And I felt it was very important to go and cover that and also to be part and support of the people there.
Can I ask, it was 2011, how old you were by then?
Oh, you have to do the math.
Yeah. Let us try.
I'm born in 84.
So you're 4 years younger than me. If I was 31, you must have been 27 around that age.
Yeah. So we were trying to support the village, and I was targeted by the Israeli army when I was there. And I was already working as a journalist with the BBC, but I wasn't there in the capacity of covering. I was also chanting and protesting. And I was injured a few times in my knees and my legs with tear gas canisters. And eventually, I think they realized, so the only thing I do in the protest is chant. So I kind of didn't use my voice for the music, but I kind of used it in the protest. So at least I can do something useful. So I would just chant in the protest. And one soldier had a scarf. They pulled me from the scarf. And the other one tucked my legs. So it was like a lynch. They kicked my legs and I was hanging from the other guy's arm.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I heard a bit of cracking in my neck. And that's when my spine was broken. My neck was broken in 2 places. But after that, I was beaten by one of the general commanders there for about half an hour with sticks.
That is horrible.
So my whole body was like in a state of trauma. And eventually, because they were trying to make me, like, they were trying to shut me up and to let me like stop, and I didn't want to stop. So I just kept telling him like, hit, like nothing's gonna stop me, until they pepper sprayed me in the eyes directly, and that took me down immediately.
Oh my goodness.
And I was trying to like take my eyes out, because it was like the most painful part was the eyes. It wasn't as much as the hitting. But of course, after a few minutes, I realized it was painful. And it was also the same, it was a crazy day. It was May 13, 2011. And for some reason, that commander went completely nuts in that village. And he shot another friend of ours, Chris, who was an American and who was protesting, and they took a big chunk of his head, his scalp, out with the tear gas.
Oh God.
They beat up the woman, they arrested some of the women, and it was just an insane amount of violence used against us, and we were just chanting. Like, that's
Yeah.
the only thing we were doing. So I was taken to hospital, and the medical system in Palestine is not really good. It's hospitals under occupation operating under the system. So in the Palestinian hospital, I didn't want to go to an Israeli hospital because I could have risked arrest. So I went to the Palestinian hospital, and because my whole face was swollen from all the beatings, they x-rayed, and my leg was swollen and I had more pain in my leg. So they x-rayed my leg, and they told me that, yeah, you just have to take pills and everything will be okay and nothing's broken. I was like, okay. I was grateful and went home. And then we had another protest 2 days after for the Nakba, and I went out to that protest, and I was injured again. I was shot with a tear gas canister in my foot. That injury got me, like, I had to get surgery for it. And when I was through the process of going through the crutches and I started feeling that something wasn't right in my body. I started having aches when I sleep. I started having discomfort with the pillows, started changing pillows, not really understanding what's going on, but there was something going on. And then after I did the foot surgery and I was on the crutches, there was like more pain because I had to put more pain on my shoulders. And at that point, I went to the hospital in Jerusalem, and they immediately said, like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm feeling some pins and needles everywhere. Like, I don't know what's going on. And they said, okay, let's get you into an MRI. I got into the MRI. I was alone with one of my friends. And I come out and there was like doctors, like more than there was when I went in. And I could hear that there was noise and things happening. But in the MRI, there's so much noise that you can't really. But I knew something was up. When I got out and I saw all these doctors, I was like, what's going on? And they're like, what did you do? Were you in a car accident? I was like, no. And they were like, your neck is shattered. I was like, what do you mean my neck is shattered? And they're like, your neck, it's broken in 2 places and you have 70% of your spine that's cut off.
Oh my God. And you didn't even realize after the first beating up, only after the second one when you went to hospital.
And it was just like the broken bones were cutting through the whole time. They were like, oh, sit in a wheelchair. And I was like, why would I sit in a wheelchair? Like, I came walking. What's wrong? And they're like, just sit in a wheelchair. And I was like, okay. And then I was taken to a doctor. The first doctor looked at the MRI and he's like, your neck is broken and you're in stage 1 of paralysis. And I was like, what kind of paralysis? And he's like, full body paralysis. I was like, you're insane.
Oh God.
What do you mean? There's no such thing. And he was like, your spine is already severed. We don't know how your body's still functioning, but you're going to be paralyzed within a month. And I was like, any other options? And he said, no, this is what's going to happen. And if you're very lucky, you'll get to have some movement in your head if you do a reconstruction surgery to maintain that your neck doesn't collapse. And I was like, okay, this guy is completely crazy. I left with my friend and I was like, this is probably just some madness. Left, I got up, didn't use the walker, didn't use the wheelchair. I went on my crutches. And that started the whole journey of like checking doctors. And I went to Israeli doctors. I went to Palestinian doctors. I went from the north to the south. And everybody said the same thing.
Oh no.
That there's no chance that you're gonna walk again. There's no chance. Blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's 2 options. I'm either gonna trust the Western medicine, or I have to look for a way out. And one of my very close friends, her mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had refused the diagnosis, and she wanted to go through holistic healing. Right. So I had kind of had heard about this option, and we watched. My mom had brought me like years before that the book The Secret, and I was like, I remember something about some guy being injured and they were able to walk again. Like, where was that? Search. It was on The Secret, and I was like, okay, maybe this is it. This is gonna be the Bible. and it's either this or I take the diagnosis by these doctors. And I stopped seeing doctors. And by then, I already had lost my left side completely.
Oh God. Okay.
So it was immediate. Like after the MRI, I think in 2-3 days, my left side was gone. And I could see the deterioration because I could feel the numbness moving from one place to another. I could feel the pins and needles moving. And I was in much, much, much more pain in my shoulders and my neck area. And that's when my journey for healing started. There was a lot of anger in the beginning. I was really angry at the commander who injured me. And we kind of know the commanders because they come to the same area and it becomes very personal. There was a lot of sulking and like, why is this happening to me? And the victimhood and crying and angry and shouting and da da da. And then I was like, okay, this is it. Yeah, I need I'm either gonna have to go by this, like by trying to find another solution, another way, or I'm just gonna have to give up into a wheelchair. And I just decided that there's no way. Like I have ADHD since I was a kid. I've never sat down for more than a few seconds. It was just like a diagnosis that was impossible for me to understand. And I found myself confined in the bed. And when I was a kid, I always used to have, like, I had faith that there was God and I could always believe that I was speaking to him and that he could hear me. And that kind of was erased.
Yes.
Systematically erased by my family because I come from a communist side of my father and an atheist on my mother. And it was just like, this is woohoo, woohoo, whatever world, it doesn't exist and its religions are, corrupt. It was erased basically out of me, that idea. And I used to always have this, like, I would be able to hear things and to be able to sense things, but it was so far rejected that I had to bottle it in basically with a lot of alcohol. So it disappears. And at that point I was like, what about that voice?
I love that you were able to hear the voice.
Yeah, so I was like, let's see if he's still there. I refer to he, but in me it's the mother of all. And I went down that route of asking for support, and it was immediate. It was just immediate that the moment I asked, I received, and things started opening up for me. So I was able to kind of rest a little bit more to understand that I'm not alone doing this and that I will get guidance and I will get support and I just have to calm down. So I only had access to things on YouTube and access to some things from my friend's mother that she had told me about. And she gave me a lot of strength because she was fighting like no other warrior I have seen. And she kept fighting. Her main thing was she wanted to see her son, who was in jail, and he was imprisoned for 30 years.
Oh, gosh.
So there was very low chances, and she passed when he was in prison.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, but she came for his aid a year later in a court hearing and shifted his sentence from 30 to 20. And he was released early. So I guess she needed to move to that level in order to...
So in spirit form, you mean she helped, yeah?
Yes,
as a spirit guide. Oh, that's beautiful.
So her journey, we were doing it at the same time, and I would learn from her some things and from the meditations, and I used to do jiu-jitsu.
Nice.
And MMA, and her daughter used to do Kundalini, and we used to do Kundalini together, but just like YouTube, whatever we could find on YouTube, we do it. And of course, after the injury, I couldn't move a thing, so it was just, the yoga was out, but the isotones and the binaural beats were in. I started using isotones, binaural beats. I had been a vegetarian since I was a kid, and it was just 2 years when I was in the UK. After coming back from the UK, apparently vegetables in the UK are not vegetables.
Oh my God, tell me about it. I used to study there too.
So it was, I thought I was eating the same way. I was eating the same diet I was eating in Palestine, vegetarian, but there was nothing there. So I kind of got severe anemia. And I'm not really good on making sure that I eat healthy. So let's not blame it all on the British. But Tesco salads are not real. That's the thing.
Oh.
So yeah, I decided to eat meat, and that's when I came back. And when I got injured, I was still eating meat, and the immediate calling was like, "Stop that meat!
Wow.
Stop the ingesting any food and any fear and any hormones." I went vegetarian again, so I changed my diet. I started listening to Louise Hay, God bless her soul, wherever she is. It was through that process of listening to Louise Hay that I understood about forgiveness. It was a very strong thing. So every time I would come to meditate, the anger would come up about the commander. I would get so angry about the situation and why it happened and the occupation and why we live like this and and I wouldn't khalas yani. There was nowhere, there was no meditation happening. So I realized that the only way that I can open this gate is to also go through forgiveness. And I tried to do a pineal gland detox. And my father, being a communist, he comes from Egypt. He believes in the gods of Egypt and the pharaohs. And he had, as a kid, I grew up listening to the key of, like, to having the key of life. And he would always put a key of life with me, and he would make me the eye of Horus.
I know what that looks like, but what is the key of life? May I ask? Is it
the key of
symbol?
life, it symbolizes the key to the other world, and it looks like a cross but open from the top, like it's
yes, I've seen it. Yes.
These are symbols that I grew up with, and I heard somebody say about, like, the pineal gland helps with being able to reach these places, and it was as if immediately I connected to something in my genes that knew this. And I started the pineal gland detox, and then I was like, oh my God, okay, there's like, wow, things are changing.
May I ask, because I'm sure some listeners will be very interested to hear how we can detox our pineal gland. How did you do it?
So it's you stop, first of all, you stop using fluoride in anything in your water.
Yeah, toothpaste, all these things, right?
Everything that has to do with fluoride, you remove it. You go vegetarian. It's not that you have to go vegetarian for all of your life. It's just that there's some aspects of the meat that help calcify the pineal gland. So if you need to go that deep into a state of healing and that deep into a state of connecting only with your upper 3 chakras, you need that because you need to be light. If you're the opposite and you need to be grounded, then you need the meat. So it's just depends on what you need. And that point in my healing, I needed to be up here.
Yes.
I needed to use whatever sources of power were that would connect me to spirit rather than to the earthly, to the earth. Also, there's spirulina, chlorella. They help. Their seaweeds. They support also the detoxification of the pineal gland. It's also about how you start dealing with your thoughts. So it was also a detox of hate and anger that was bottled in me for a lot of years. It was a process. And I was just in meditation. So I made a program. I banned my mother from coming to the house. I banned mainly my mother, because she's like the type who was like, oh my God, you're gonna be paralyzed, and I told you don't go to these protests, and look at you, you're broken. So I couldn't do with anyone who had melodrama, anyone who would look at me with the whole victim eyes. It was only people that were laughing, supportive, and understanding. And the only things that I let into my space, I controlled my space in sense of what I listened to. No more politics, nothing like that. I was just watching comedies to get me into a happy state when I would then meditate. It was just picking up whatever I can pick up from the internet. So completely trying to control the vibration and to be in a higher state, which meant I made a program, the daily program of like cartoons. When do I meditate? When do I watch this? When do I watch that? And of course, I was praying all the time. So this was at the same time as praying and talking to God and asking for support, asking for him to open the ways, and asking for like things to come so that I can understand also what is next. And it would keep opening. In that process of asking for guidance, I was searching for a doctor who would do the reconstructive surgery, because they said if my neck collapsed, I might die. So
oh my God.
I was searching for doctors and I found an Israeli doctor who had worked on robotics. He had some articles about working on the spine. And I was so excited because it looked like he can do some stuff. And I went to see him in Hadassah. And he told me the same thing that everybody else said, but he was a little bit more enthusiastic, happy looking. And I was like, what if I tell you like I believe that I'm gonna walk and I can do this? And he's like, well, that's very interesting.
That's a nice response.
I was like,
Was he able to think that maybe she has a point, or was he of the opinion that this is impossible?
no, he thought it was impossible.
Okay, okay.
Because he told my mother at some point who came with me, like she might need a lot of like mental help when she does the surgery. And I told him that I want to do the surgery my way. And he told me, if you want to do it your way, then I would have to do it privately.
Right.
And I was like, okay. And he told me the stages of the paralysis. I was like, okay, I'll listen to this part, but nothing else after that. And he's like, yani now you've lost the left side, the right side, of course, you're going to lose as well. The last stage is you're going to lose control of your bowels. And I was like, and what does that mean? He's like, the moment you reach there, khalas, there's no return. There's no fixing anything before, and there's no fixing anything after, and that's where you will be. And the surgery that we will do is ACDF. We will fuse your discs together, and this will help you so that your neck won't collapse, and hopefully you will be able to have some movement in your head so you can nod for yes or no, so you'd have that movement. And I was like, okay, I'll do the surgery my way. I refused to sign, like you'd have to go in for the surgery and they tell you like, because it comes in a theory that you might lose your voice, that you're going to get like some problems with the thyroids, a million and one things that could go wrong, and you have to listen to them. And that was exactly the opposite of what my whole programming was. So I was sitting there, my mom was crying, and I was like, ah!
Oh my God.
Singing
Tragic,
there.
yeah.
And she had to sign in my place, if I remember correctly. And I told him, I'll come back when the time is right. He's like, you need to do it fast. And I was like, if you say that the last stage is bowel movement, then I'll wait for that. And he's like, if you get to that stage, there's no going back.
Oh God, okay.
And I was like, I need more time. I can't come in now. I'm not ready. When I'm ready, I'll call you. And then I went in even more intense stage of preparing for that surgery, and the surgery became it. The surgery became the target. I was focusing on my body. I was doing the meditations, but I needed something to put all my energy and focus straight into. That surgery was it. I was like, this is going to be the surgery that makes me walk. I'm going to walk out of that surgery and my neck is going to be completely fused and my spine is going to go back to functioning perfectly fine. And so I started doing all of the practices of Louise and like putting affirmations every day. I would wake up, I start with meditation, and then I would go into like visualizations, because by then I wasn't moving too much. I was already in a wheelchair. Wow. And I was just doing the visualizations of how I'm going to walk, what I'm going to eat. And I wrote down the stages of what I'm going to do before the surgery, after the surgery, when am I going to walk? I just visualized it all constantly, all day long, every day.
Massive. Wow.
For a whole month. And then I remember I woke up, I was at that point, I think I was able to stand with crutches. I don't remember having the wheelchair in Jerusalem. But yeah, I needed like somebody to carry me from one spot to another. And I remember waking up and I couldn't move. I was in Jerusalem and I woke up and I had no control. So I had pissed myself in the bed and I was like, oh, so this guy was not joking.
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay, so this is it. I gave him a call and I was like, okay, I'm ready. And he's like, how bad is it? I was like, it's pretty bad. It's like the last stage you talked about. And he's like, oh, Ashira. I was like, yeah, but don't worry, I'm going to walk in 3 days. And he's like, if you walk in 3 days, I'll give you whatever you want. I was like, you give me whatever I want. You take off part of the money. That's what I want. And he was like, okay, well, I'll give you a discount if you manage to do this. And I was like, 3 days, brother, give me 3 days and I'll be walking. And he was like, okay, if whatever you say. And I went to the surgery, made sure that like my mom isn't weeping and crying. And I told my friends, if she does this, her drama, kick her out. And I sat there and I meditated before the surgery. I meditated with the doctors before we started the surgery,
I
and that
love
was,
that. They joined you in that?
yes, that was one of the conditions that we do it together. And I was like,
Oh,
you have to
wow.
at least meditate and think with me,
That
and
is so beautiful.
that I would have this energy when I go into the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Walked out, taken out of the surgery 6 hours later. The first thing I did was, when the anesthesia came off, was to take off the plaster they put on your mouth,
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure I wasn't supposed to talk, I think, for 24 hours. I removed the plate, made sure that my voice was there. I was singing. I was like, oh, hallelujah. And I made sure that the first thing happened. And that was how I planned it, that I first am able to speak and to sing. And then at night, you're not supposed to eat for, I don't know, a week or something, just to make sure that I told my friend, bring me food. And I had planned exactly what kind of food. And because I had visualized what meal I'm going to have exactly. And I was like, no one's going to mess with this. And they had to like sneak it in the hospital so I can get it.
Gosh.
I ate my meal, I sang, I didn't listen to them. And I asked to reduce the amount of morphine and drugs that they were putting in so that my body can start like feeling. And I could immediately feel my legs where I could move my toes. I could immediately feel things like my left side that I wasn't moving. I could
No way.
more movement there. It was just immediate. And just like we had the bet, in 3 days, I told him our bet is if I walk from here to here, I can leave the hospital. Because I didn't want to be in hospital environment as well. So we had the Ashira march, and I didn't do it walking. I had visualized that I would do it walking, but I had a walker.
Yeah.
And I was able to get out of bed. They told me like, oh, if you get out of bed, whatever you want. I was like, get out of bed, watch me.
No way.
And I walked out of bed, walked the corridor, and everybody was like, yeah, you did it. And he
That's
was
incredible. And those are the doctors who said it's impossible, even post-surgery, to walk, right?
yes, yes.
So what did they think at that point?
I wasn't really thinking about them.
They must have been shocked to see you walk, right?
Yeah. I stayed in touch with the doctor for a long time. It's been a few years that I have reached out to him. He's a really nice guy, and I think it was his only like the full success story. And I used to use turmeric. It's like the golden milk recipe, but I used to use it with a Palestinian twist.
Oh, what is that like? So turmeric with milk, you mean, mixed?
Yeah, when I was losing the senses, I would get electric pain.
Right.
So it's like an electricity, the spine would go, and I would get pain that would last afterwards. And the auntie that I was talking about, my friend's mother, she was drinking turmeric, and she's like, try this, try this, try this. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. And I was able to take it and stop taking Lyrica because they had given me Lyrica to stop me from having the pains. And I switched Lyrica to the turmeric, and it made a huge deal. And every time I would get the signal that some pain is coming, I would immediately chug down my potion and it would cut it. I wouldn't feel it. I wouldn't feel the pain anymore.
Incredible.
And I used it also full on post-surgery. I didn't take cortisone because they had put so much cortisone in me in the surgery that I was already pumped. And after that, I stopped, and I was like, that was part of the agreement, that I don't have to take any medication if I do walk, and I don't have to go to rehab. I was forced to go to rehab. I went for 3 days, and every time I would go in with a walking, I would go out on a wheelchair.
Oh my God, really?
Because they would start telling me like, sit down and play with the Play-Doh, and how can you reach back? And I was like, I can do all this. Like, I don't need you to, like, it was counterproductive. And if I had done it, I would have received the disability for the car, and you get like full-on disability from the government and support. And everybody was like, do it, because then you get money. And I was like,
no.
money or my bones. And I ran out of rehab.
Wow.
And I just continued with like curcum, turmeric, and it's basically you can make it into a paste. You can get the recipe from the internet for golden milk, and you just add, if you have severe pain. If you don't have severe pain, you can just go with the curcum, with the turmeric. But I would add cloves, and I would add nutmeg, كبش قرنفل, cloves and nutmeg, There was another spice, Ashira. It's a Palestinian herb. I'll get to it hopefully. But yeah, it was my medicine, and since then I don't take any medication whatsoever.
My goodness, that's such an incredible, powerful story.
Yeah,
I can't even believe it. It's just incredible.
it's a blessing, alhamdulillah.
It's a blessing, and I love your connection to God, that after you were educated to not believe in anything and let that go, that you found that again is beautiful.
Yeah, I probably it definitely wouldn't have worked without having a
Yeah,
spiritual
exactly, the
aspect,
faith. Wow.
because that was just the beginning of the journey. And then with everything else, whenever the doors close, there's only one gate that opens,
Mm,
and it's always that faith, and
that
that divine.
is incredible. So obviously, after going through all of that, you must be a completely different version of yourself than the one you were before.
So it's interesting because I kind of reached a point where I was like, okay, I made this change and it's really big, and I don't know how it happened, and I know that God was involved, and I know that I got lots of support, but now what?
Mm-hmm.
And the programming in my brain was much like, there was so much in my head that was still old programming. And it felt like that was just the beginning, because after that, I was able to walk, and then I had this massive fear that something's going to hit me again,
Yeah.
and that I can lose whatever I had in any second, and that I would go back into paralysis. And the only thing that helped me was opening gate to Sufi Whirling. And I was so angry at home at some point, and I was like, I can't go out, I can't do this, I can't drive, I'm scared, blah, blah, blah. And I had so much energy and I can't sit down. And I was like, I put some really loud music and I started turning around, and I could whirl for a long time. And
So
it
for
was
the listeners who don't know what Sufi whirling is, I know I have seen videos. I've seen men with like long skirts, or like skirts that were moving around, turning around, and then the skirts would like open up beautifully, and it just looked beautiful to watch. So is that what you were
beautiful to
doing?
watch and magical to do.
Yeah,
More
gosh.
magical to do, to be honest, than to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I would just be in the house and whirl. So whirling is just turning around and you spin. You basically spin. When we were kids, we used to spin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very primal instinct in children. And after years of doing it now, I did more research on it to understand, why did this change my life so much? And they did MRIs to study what happens to the whirlers. And what happens when you're whirling is your motor, the body, is involved in keeping you stable, so much so to the point that you lose this, what we call the egoic devil mind, the lower mind. So it
Like that.
reconnects you to the prefrontal cortex. So the electricity actually starts pumping in the head of the whirlers to the prefrontal cortex, the one which takes the decisions. And in Sufism, it's like the heaven, which is the connection that you have when you take decisions from a conscious area. And the fear, amygdala-based brain, reptilian brain shuts down when you're doing the whirling. And for someone with ADHD, it means that after I whirl, I am able to sit down and rest.
I think I should be swirling all day long then.
It feels like that. And its impact isn't just immediate. So it retrains your brain.
That's
To
incredible.
do that action, so that when you're in a state of fear and you get disconnected from your prefrontal cortex, then you go back and the brain repatterns this connection in the prefrontal cortex so that you can refocus again.
Oh,
and
so good.
Things just magically started happening after I started whirling. The fear dropped immediately. I was just like, what was I even thinking? And on a spiritual level, for me, it was the immediate connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like before, I would have to sit and meditate and ask. And in physicality, the moment I whirl, I physically have this full connection, understanding that we are not alone in this universe, that there is a higher consciousness, that you tap into it immediately. You lose this form of the body and you tap into this mass consciousness and into this amazing space of all being one in a sense. And it's the most it's like being home every time
Mhm.
and returning home. So it became my home and my sanctuary, and my
Wow.
safety was in Whirling. And after that, I saw how my brain still takes me to the same places and leads me to the same destination. So I stopped doing journalism. I moved into human rights work. I was working with the Human Rights Watch and then Amnesty. And while I was working with Human Rights Watch, I was targeted again, but this time by Palestinian police.
Oh gosh,
And
what?
the police officer hit me on my neck and moved the titanium box in my neck.
No
And I was like,
way.
God saves you once, and then you go back, and this happens again. Then there's a message greater than me here in what I'm doing. There has to be something. I can blame the universe, but there has to be something within my being that's leading me exactly to the same place, that's attracting me to the same things, that's bringing me into these unkind situations. And that's when I realized that I have to do some work with my head and to kind of face some of the demons that return.
Mhm.
And I went to Peru and I did ayahuasca in Peru.
Oh
And it was
wow.
very strong calling. It was just immediate, like, this is not your path. Journalism is not your path. You detoured and go back, do healing. And I was shown that healing is my path.
That's
I didn't
beautiful.
I didn't listen.
You did not. You didn't listen to ayahuasca.
Yes, there were some amazing messages, but then I went out and I was like out of the jungle in a few days, and I'm like, yeah, but it's like a substance. Maybe it's just the same as like when, you're high or you're drunk and it's just a substance. And how do I trust into that?
Mhm.
2 years later, I was kicked out of the country,
Which
forced to be
country? Palestine?
at Palestine. Yes.
Oh, no way. And where did you go?
I went to the UK because I was working with Amnesty International, and
That's insane.
I was basically targeted by the Palestinian Authority again for my work in investigating their cases of torture and extrajudicial killings. And it was the same message again. Ayahuasca told you a year ago to leave this path, and you
Mhm.
still stayed there, and the universe kicked my butt all the way
Oh no.
until I got out of it. It's like if you don't listen to the gentle nudges of the universe, it's gonna come down on you, and it's gonna come down hard.
That's
And then
crazy.
I decided to leave that line of work by force, not by will. And I went to India, and
Mhm.
there I did the Osho meditations, active
Mhm.
meditations. And I met the community and I found the whirlers, and I was like, oh, so I should just be whirling at home. I can whirl outside with humans. And I learned also about Tantra and all forms of like magical lessons there, and also about my addiction and alcoholism, and I started the journey to clean myself up. And then I decided, I took the choice to go back to the country and agree to not do any work in media anymore. And
Mhm.
I was basically confined to living in Jericho and to meditating all the time.
Mhm.
And it was just a beautiful experience because I got also to connect with Christ consciousness. It was just this
Mm.
amazing, beautiful journey that started in Jericho.
I
And
love that.
yeah, it still is a magical journey, keeps unfolding.
That's how I
Um,
connected to Palestine as soon as the war now started. I started sending healing over, and I felt Christ consciousness was right there, working, sending healing, taking care of the people. I felt it so strongly. And I was like,
it's
yeah, Christ consciousness is there in the Holy Land. It's right there, helping.
it's there, it's felt
Hmm.
in every ounce of us. So also there I had the calling that I want to work with kids who went to prison and to start doing work on that.
Kids who
And
went to prison.
children, yeah, children who
Yes.
came to
Oh,
prison.
yes. I heard that this happens a lot, indeed.
Yeah, Israel kind of lowered the age so that they can arrest 12-year-olds here.
Yes,
That's the
yes.
only place where you can incarcerate 12-year-olds and drug
Hmm.
them. So I wanted to work with especially children because I was like, that was the point for me that changed my life, just being detained for a few hours. How
Hmm.
do these kids go into prison for years and come out? And I was sent this amazing teacher who was sent actually for my friend Hurriya, whose mother I told you about.
Hmm.
And she handed him over to me and was like, okay, let him be your teacher. And we immediately had a connection. His name is Kiratina Khalsa, George, born a George. And he spent 3 months in Jericho with me, teaching me Kundalini yoga, Kundalini Tantra yoga.
And by that
And
time, your body was able to move so that it could do
by then
yoga.
I was whirling and doing Kundalini. So like Kundalini is
Wow.
really strong. So half an hour breath of fire and doing Nabi Kriyas and jumping from on my head and everything.
That's incredible. Okay, so you did the yoga with him?
So we trained and he was like, come on, you can't like have a dream and just, let's go do this work. Let's start this dream of yours. And I was like, okay, let's go work with the kids of Nabi Saleh. And that's the village where my neck was broken. And we did our first session there. And I told the kids how to word. And I was like, oh my God, these are kids that I know since they were babies. And I was able to see how it would calm them down and how like resilient and strong they are by virtue of being in that place. And yeah, since then I started the project Catharsis. And so that was 2018.
6 years now.
Yes. And it's just been one step at a time and then following whatever guidance I get from the universe. And the idea is it's a service project.
Yes.
So everybody like I do the retreats for free, I do the trainings for free. And it started with just working with children who went out of prison. Then there was a calling for women and women who went to prison and girls who went to prison. And then there was much more people interested. So also neighborhoods which are under threat of demolition, children who come from the system, like in the sense of like domestic problems and social welfare. And then I started in Gaza. I found an amazing partner, Reem Abu Jaber, who's in Gaza right now. May she be safe and her family be blessed. And we started working with her association, which is NOAA, Arts and Culture. And they have an amazing they had an amazing building in Gaza and a kindergarten and a library. So I trained the workers there, emotional freedom technique. I trained them, not me, in the sense of also God sent us an angel called Kath Temple, who trains in emotional freedom technique. And she started giving free trainings for Palestinians. Also neural language programming, emotional freedom technique, coaching, whatever Kath can offer, like whatever she has, she's been offering up to us through also her Happiness Foundation. And we were able to train these women to start working with the kids in Gaza. And we started having retreats for the children, one-on-one sessions, kids who were wetting their beds since like 4 years. After 6 sessions, they stopped, giving them meditation, yoga, storytelling to help with the storytelling for trauma. And we do retreats for the staff who are in the center. And that's happening simultaneously with work in the West Bank. And as angels come, we were also connected to Dr. Gabor Mate.
That's incredible. So for people who do not know him, maybe, I hope I'm not wrong, but I think he survived the Holocaust as a young boy. Is that true?
He was an infant. He lost his grandparents in the Holocaust, and
yes,
he went through that, and he's a great advocate for Palestine and for freedom. And he is one of the best doctors he created a program called Compassionate Inquiry, and he deals with addiction, and not only addiction, because Compassionate Inquiry can heal you from like physical ailments. He managed to fix my I was on the onslaught of, in the beginning, arthritis, and with one session with him my markers went down.
That's
immediately.
Incredible.
He has so much to offer this world, also about childhood trauma, ADHD, and how to just have a compassionate eye to look at everything in this world.
And he has many books out as well. So
yes, When the Body Says No.
Yes.
Just a brilliant human, just a brilliant human being. And I connected with him, and we planned a conference, and he came to Palestine, and he managed to work with so many women and people in Gaza as well on Zoom. And it was just a brilliant experience to have him here and to bring all this knowledge to this land. And he's still been very supportive because his content is mainly in English. So we've been translating and having his work also in Arabic.
Oh,
And we do
wow.
workshops that are available in Arabic. And we started training different groups of people. And we have a platform on Teachable that's free for Palestinians and Arabs to have access to material that deal with holistic healing. And the whole idea is to have this world, which is going back to our roots and finding a way to deal with the trauma. So, for example, a lot of what I discovered when dealing with trauma and trying to uncover it is I've been to like psychotherapists and Western talk therapy modalities, and they don't work with us. This is like the colonizers' way of dealing with returning vectors to their countries after they've come down to our countries and wiped us off. It doesn't work with our nervous systems. It doesn't work with our faith systems. And the things that work with us happen to be very rooted and grounded in the body. And also in the situation in Palestine, we don't have PTSD. We have continuous trauma.
Yes.
The trauma doesn't end it. Until Palestine is not liberated, the trauma doesn't end. And after even the liberation of Palestine, we're going to have to deal with intergenerational trauma for years. And it's like all these modalities don't work. And with Dr. Gabor, it's the compassionate inquiry kind of works because there's compassion in looking and asking the questions and understanding where the roots come from for these problems and to try to find our way of healing. And with Tibetan pulsing or EFT, it works on the nervous system. It can regulate you without retaking you into the trauma so that you have to reopen all of your wounds. And our wounds gush open and nobody, it's not closable. The Palestinians have engraved resilience, just as we inherit intergenerational trauma. We've inherited tools of resilience that no other humans have.
I know. I'm so at awe at what Palestinians have been going through and how you've been coping and how beautiful you still are,
There's so much that has to do with Islam and the faith, and also with Christianity, and having rooted like in us, for example, that we celebrate Christmas as Muslims, and there's so much beauty in the way our cultures are intertwined and our faith is intertwined, and there's so much strength in this faith that gets taken away from the Western medicine or Western education or Western philosophy that wipes it away, and we're thrown into this very, very sterile white kind of environment that doesn't work with our bodies. So the idea of catharsis is to bring back the tools, to use the tools from other natives, to use the tools from other communities that have dealt with intergenerational trauma or have dealt with continuous trauma, and to seek and support and to also give back, to offer also part of what we have, our music, our dabke, our community, the way we do our funerals, the way we go to our protests, the way that we have faith in and connection to our land, to our olive trees. There's so many things that have made us resilient over the years that we can also share with other people in the world and open it up to them.
Definitely. Even
eventually I managed to make a method which is like active meditation, which combines what comes from us and is integral to like our existence and our ability. And I learned it also. It's not like something that was systematic to me, but I learned it from the children and from their ability to deal with trauma in Gaza, in the Bedouin communities, in the villages in Palestine, where they still kept some of the old traditions. And I took these into the healing of other communities, and I saw how it helps us in a way.
It's incredible. So you have your own healing method that you use now?
Yeah, and
Yes.
I took from the Kundalini a lot of things, but Kundalini is very, very strong. And it doesn't work without a very strong discipline, and it doesn't work if you are in a state of continuous trauma. So I took some of the practices which work on our nervous system, regulating the nervous system, also working with the polyvagal theory and how to just build more resilience in the brain to withhold all the trauma is what we need.
Yes.
So to build elasticity in the brain so that we can hold on to that, like if it comes, we're ready for it, and how to get rid of it and recycle it back to the earth in our ways.
I love that. I also wanted to ask you, because that's how I got interested in reaching out to you, is that you were looking for people, both Arabic speaking and potentially even English speakers, to go into Gaza after, inshallah, once the war is over.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more about this vision of yours to bring healers, therapists, etc.
Yeah, so
into
the
Gaza?
idea is the devastation and the level of trauma is nothing that I think the world has ever seen.
I know.
It's engraved within the stones in a way to make sure that we intervene, and we intervene with the methods that I just stated for the reason that I stated, that things that work for us
Yes.
and modalities that work for the Palestinians and that work on the body immediately, because we have children that are in a state of shock,
Yes.
unable to speak, unable to deal. And it's just about trying to immediately intervene to lower the heaviness, and also to have people who know how to use energy to clean the energy there, to help the energy settle after that immense amount of pain, and to also do some healing on the earth as well as the humans and the people. Of course, the most important priority is the people, but once we also work on the energy and the vibration, the people of Gaza are the most resilient out of all of us.
They
in
are.
Palestine.
They are.
And they have far more resources than we have. And going in to support them, there has to be an understanding that there's people that are broken and there's people that are resilient. And to work with people with resilience, you have to have a certain language of understanding of the faith that comes with this kind of trauma.
Definitely.
And rather than weaken them through talking to them about what they endured and the pain, it's seeing how you can eliminate the physical impact on their bodies, to start with healing and cleaning their bodies from the trauma, and to open the electricity and to help that part which has been very dissociated, and the part which is desensitized, because many of them and us, we've been desensitized to trauma even. And to try to do that in the most compassionate, soft, gentle way possible. And to hopefully that will affect as many people as possible there.
Now, I know we already started working with traumatized Palestinians through Zoom, like online.
Yeah.
Is there any other way you feel we can support you?
We have an amazing number of people who volunteered, you included.
Nice. That's good to hear.
Support. We have around 400 therapists from around the world.
That's amazing. Wow.
That are offering sessions free of charge to Palestinians wherever they are.
Amazing.
And it's just been beautiful to see how beautiful minds and hearts come together to work together now. And of course, post-war, it's going to be much more needed.
Yes.
And there has to be different ways to work. So hopefully we can get a delegation inside and to work with the people. We have to rebuild the center, which we work with the kids, because that's mainly for children and women.
Yes.
And that's a priority. It's just about being connected to Catharsis as a volunteer, if you want to volunteer. And of course, we accept donations, mainly to Gaza, to the center that the main focus right now is to be able to.
Is there a link that you can share that I can put into the podcast show notes for the donations?
There isn't a link of donation. You can contact me, because it all depends on how people want to share and how they want to send their money. If they wanted to go to the West Bank, if they wanted to go to Gaza, if they want to do it we have patients from Gaza in the West Bank right now. We have Gazans in Egypt that we need to support.
Yes.
Okay. And I prefer to have it like a personal connection, so that the people understand where their money is going, how it's going, and what they're doing.
So I will put your website link and people can contact you through your website.
Exactly.
Okay, so apart from donations and volunteering, my next question would be, you help so much. You volunteer all your time, your energy to this amazing project. Do you get help yourself? Does somebody take care of you?
Yes. I realize the importance of having that. First, I have God, alhamdulillah, and my ability to continue to connect and pray. To be grateful for everything that's offered from that source. And after that, it's beautiful angels who come to support. So just like the other Palestinians, I'm getting support from a wonderful lady in the UK.
Oh, nice. That's good
I'm
to
getting
hear.
support. I'm getting support also from like the science and non-duality family. There's lots of good people that are pushing us forward. There's an angel who's been funding Catharsis for the past years, and he wants to remain anonymous, but
Of course.
he's been the driving force behind this being able to continue to work.
Beautiful. I also just want to share that you're not on social media, because I always like to share people's social media, so for people to follow and to stay in touch. But of course, you had death threats after the war started now. So you had to take off your accounts. So I will not tag you anywhere on social media, but people can reach out over the website.
Yes, inshallah, when when the when the waters calm down, I'll go back. I'm still on
Yeah.
YouTube, so there's the
Okay.
YouTube channel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. My dear, I don't even know how to end this recording. I'm just so inspired by you, and I had to really actively try not to have tears in my eyes just because it's so incredible, your strength, your resilience, and how you show up in this world, and even worked on forgiveness for the atrocities you went through. That is just so inspiring to hear, and inspiring for the listeners, I'm sure, because we all have people we need to forgive. I myself am trying to understand, how can I forgive my government or the Western governments for how they're supporting this war? And so to hear you being able to forgive this atrocity that happened to you, it inspires me to go even deeper in my forgiveness work. So I thank you for that. I feel you're truly enlightened soul, and it's such an honor to be in your presence and to learn from you. So thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you so much for opening the space.
Take care.
Bye.